Today's conversation is for the deeply self aware mom who has done all the work, therapy, books, coaching, healing, and still finds herself cycling through dysregulation, burnout, and disconnection from her body. So I am joined by Ravelle, a clairvoyant healer, a somatic and embodiment coach, and the creator of Holosoma, her own mythology that has helped sensitive, high capacity nervous systems find real coherence across every layer of consciousness. From the spiritual to the physical, Ravelle's work bridges nervous system physiology with deep soul level integration, meeting women exactly where they are when the healing path has stopped actually working. So today we are diving into the gap between insight and embodiment. We are talking about why the mind can know something the body has not yet caught up to, what real integration looks like for sensitive moms doing cycle breaking work in the real time, and how to actually stop fixing yourself and start building sustainable capacity to actually live as the woman you already are. So this conversation is depth medicine. So buckle up, get cozy. Ravelle, I am so honored to have you here.
Yes, thank you for having me, Mackenzie.
All right, so let's get started on you just giving us a quick introduction of like where you're from, how you got to where you are today.
Yes, I grew up in Houston, Texas. So I lived there half my life and then moved over to Austin where I went to college. And I've been there up until this day, Texas through and through. Yeah, my journey has been layers and it's been really transformative of what's come up for me because I grew up in a household where I had a lot of CPTSD and a lot of internalized shame. So with that became this really early imprint in how I approached self-development around how do I fix myself? How do I understand myself? How do I recognize the patterns that are inside of me? And my parents owned a bookstore. So I literally had access to hundreds of books at my disposal. And so I remember as early as 8 years old, grabbing self-development books, being like, how do I get better? That's who I am. Like, why don't I belong? Why don't I fit in? Why is school so hard for me? And I think a lot of that had to do with the neurodivergence and not really understanding why my brain operated differently. But yeah, that began my journey of like, how do I improve? How do I get better? How do I become successful? And that built up a lot of math as I got older. I got good at achieving, I got good at succeeding. But with that, I also created this very complex and complicated mask that essentially hid my body's deeper vulnerabilities, these deeper levels of fear of, not being worthy, not being good enough. No matter what I did, there would always be something more for me to achieve or more for me to do. And I'm really grateful because I grew up as an incredibly shy, incredibly reserved, incredibly introverted individual. And, I found acting, I found sales, and both of those pathways really forced me to grow. They forced me to get good at communicating. They forced me to get good at attuning to other people. I did go through a lot of growth, but it also gave me a lot of math. And so I eventually found myself probably around 2018 where I was like, okay, what is going on? Like, why do I feel like I keep hitting a dead end? Why do I keep feeling like my body's betraying me? Why do I keep feeling like I'm constantly overthinking? I'm constantly over ruminating, playing back every scenario that would happen with any individual, high anxiety, all these different things. And so 2018, I discovered, it was time for me to go to therapy. So I started doing that, right? And that was so expansive for me. I learned so much more about how my consciousness worked, all these things that once again hit a dead end where I was like, okay, now I can literally talk circles around my therapist, and I'm like literally just talking to myself the entire therapy session. So that's when I started to get into somatic therapy, and EMDR really moved the needle in a lot of ways. Other things started to move the needle, and I started to do even deeper healings, so around breath work, all these different things. And but I didn't actually realize that I was once again almost like creating force through healing, and I'll talk about that more in depth. But in 2020, I kind of hit, and I think a lot of people did, kind of a bottom of the barrel. I was in this really successful multi six-figure role in sales, was in a good quote unquote relationship, yet I felt so dysregulated inside, constantly had imposter syndrome, especially being in such a big role and holding a lot of responsibility. And I was like, what the frick is wrong with me? Like, I've done years of work. Like, why is nothing working? And so that led me to getting invited to a psychic school by my best friend. And I literally remember her saying, like, hey, do you want to join this with me? And my thought process at the time was, okay, if I literally become psychic, surely I should be able to trust myself. Like,
Yeah.
what else could I do? And
Right.
so I joined the school and wow, blasted everything open in a way I never even knew it could. Essentially, I was given keys, system, and a framework to access any part of my consciousness of wherever I needed to go. And it was literally felt like I was given the keys to the kingdom of like, okay, now I have a map and now I know how to actually work with my brain because I used to try to meditate and I would be horrible at it. Like I could not sit still for like 5 minutes. Like I was literally like, what is wrong with me? Like I feel even more anxious now. And so this framework and system that I take my coaching clients through that I learned myself essentially helps your body become more sovereign. And it's a meditation technique that actually works with people who are high functioning and works with people whose minds are going a mile a minute. And so that happened. And then I got really deep into embodiment work and somatic work. And so what I'm so passionate about is my methodology, Holosoma. The biggest challenge right now is many people are starting to understand what that means and how to access it. But once again, energy can live with an insight, and there still needs to be this deep embodiment piece. And so Holosoma is about bringing coherence across all the layers of our consciousness through safety, through titration, through pendulation, which I can discuss, and working with someone's unique physiology because everyone has a different way of how their physiology communicates to them. And it's teaching them how to attune to that. Because so many of us were not taught how to do that at all. And for me, I had to actually access my physiology through my internal visualization to even get into my body. And I used to not be able to feel my body at all. Now I can feel things that I've never felt before, which is beautiful and incredible. But I had to understand my own unique way of entering into my body through safety in order for that magic to unfold. And this
Oh
is
my
where we
gosh.
are today.
Holy moly. Like I am like just so much more excited about where this conversation is going to go because I feel like you just told my story in different timelines, but that's how I feel like I like where were and how you psychic school. I feel like that was like how I found human design. Like that was my key to
Mm,
my like kingdom, like my treasure map. And obviously, like the nervous system came in, and that's why I combined the two because I'm like, you can't have the keys unless you have the,
yeah.
nervous system to hold it. So I feel like
Yes.
our stories are very similar, but I'm so excited to learn more about your methodology. You speak so powerfully the gap between insight and integration and the experience of being deeply self aware or yet still cycling through dysregulation, like collapse or disconnection from your body. So can you walk us through like what is actually happening in a sensitive, like intelligent, like nervous system when the mind knows, but the body
Yeah.
has not caught up? And why do you think so many of the most aware women, especially mothers, like get stuck in this loop?
100%. I mean, even going back to what I was talking about a minute ago, like so many self aware women, especially mothers, get stuck in this loop because a lot of us have been conditioned to fix, produce, perform, push through instead of actually listening and attuning. And it's funny even saying that because ironically, listening itself can be triggering to a self aware woman or a high functioning woman. Because once again, like being told to slow down and listen can feel unsafe for someone, especially if they're used to being in a nervous system that learned early on that performance equals safety or action equals safety. So even going back to what I was saying earlier about when I sat down to get still and meditate, I got really triggered. I was like, I can't just think about nothing and like slow down. Like that was super dysregulating for my nervous system. And for self-aware women, especially for mothers, I mean, they're carrying the family, they're holding the emotions, they're absorbing all of the stress. They're literally managing everyone else's needs. This is so common with women. And so healing, even in and of itself, unconsciously becomes another performance. So this is one of the biggest issues that I am seeing in the wellness industry right now, that healing has become transactional. We're told if we do this practice perfectly, or if we do this method, or if you go to this workshop or do this breath work or do whatever other modality it is, then you are going to feel happy. You're going to get XYZ. And obviously there's good intentions there, of course. But really the challenge is that anytime we think I'm not okay exactly where I'm at, and in order to get there, I have to heal this thing, that is signaling to your body that it is not okay exactly as it is. And it's never going to feel safe enough enough to release the deeply held patterns, these thwarted survival responses in our body, as long as there's that premise. And so that is what I see as being a huge challenge. There's just so much there where women will access the insights and they'll even have catharsis and they will, have emotions move through them and memories will come up and even breakthroughs. And this deeper well, though, of deeper survival patterns will still just burrow deeper. And then it will just be harder for them to access it. So one thing I think is so important, and this has probably come up for you, especially around capacity, is resourcing. Like a woman needs to resource before she does any type of deep work on herself around releasing trapped sensations that aren't serving her. Because resourcing, being able to feel safe, being able to be in your pleasure, letting the body know that it's actually supported, it's connected before diving into the pain is absolutely necessary in order to actually get to the resourcing is support. So you can think of resourcing in many different layers. So resourcing is giving your body enough safety, enough support that you actually feel good enough, safe enough to go into the parts of your body, the parts of your field where there's maybe a lot of fear or overwhelm or, feeling like death or all these different really intense trap sensations where we might be shut down or all these different things. And so resourcing, when I say it happens in layers, for instance, people that are support for you in real life can be a resource for you. So maybe you have a friend that every time you're with them, they make you feel really safe. They make you feel loved. They make you feel listened to. This could be your partner. This could be literally your children. Like people that bring safety into your body. When you're with them, you feel pleasant sensations in your body. Maybe you feel yourself smiling. Maybe you feel your chest lightening and this expansion happening. And this is also recognizing when I do feel resource, what does that feel like in my body? What words can I use to describe that? Because a lot of women were not taught how to actually learn the language of their body through the felt sense. So what does lightness feel like? What does density feel like? All these different things. What does temperature feel like in my body? And developing a library of how to connect to that. Things that, once again, bring pleasant sensations into the body. Touching yourself, being able to support and hold yourself. All of these things are ways that we bring support into our physiology. Because if you think about it, what body is going to be like, oh, I feel like I'm being attacked right now. Let me go ahead and dive into all this pain. It's going to be way too overwhelming for someone's nervous system, and it's going to blow them into overwhelm or shutdown. And then they're going to get more frustrated, more annoyed of like, why isn't this working?
I'm starting to not really love that world or that word.
Yeah.
Because it's just like such a buzzword. And I think that there's a lot of negative attachment to it. So somebody just like starting on this awareness journey, we'll say that, like, how do you even start to like tap into that? Or like, how do you start to like evaluate that?
So first thing I would say, and I would advise this to every single person beginning deeper work on themselves, is stabilizing your field and getting any energy that's not you out of it. So especially as mothers, especially as women, we hold on to a lot in our energetic field. So this could be in biologically, literally in our organs. This could be in our mental field, our brain. Energetically, we have energy anatomies, the different parts of vortices of energy, chakras, etc. We all have an energetic body that magnetizes things into its field. And if you have a plethora of energy in your field that is not you, it's going to be really hard for your body to, one, be sensitive enough to pay attention to anything, two, feel stabilized enough to even do deeper work on yourself. And so a big piece that I always teach anyone that I work with is getting anything that is not you out of your body, out of your field, so you actually know what you feel like. So a lot of people I work with can have high levels of anxiety. If you ever have anxiety, that is a good telltale sign that you have energy that isn't you in your system. It is not normal to feel anxiety. It is not normal. It's common, but it is not normal. And so that's the first piece of advice I would give, is finding a structure, a framework. And I can obviously share a meditation over this to help with this. Literally doesn't have to take more than 5 minutes. Literally no excuses. You can fit it in. And I always say this too, a bad meditation is better than no meditation. But running these tools to essentially get stuff that's not you out is the first step. The second step is finding what your entry point is, where you're most activated with attuning to your body. So for me, it was my inner imagery. I'm a very intense visualizer. And that was my entry point to get into my body. Because keep in mind, like, I grew up most of my life not being able to feel my body. So I had very low interoception. I could not notice anything that was happening. And so I actually had to use my imagination to get into my body. So for other people, it will be different. They'll feel things before they see it, or other entry points. Finding out what your entry point is to get into your physiology, and just staying with that with curiosity, following the breadcrumbs of what comes up next. So if I see an image, maybe I see a color, a vision, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting, what's going to happen next? And I see where that leads me. And wherever your entry point is, you can use that to expand to other entry points. As human beings, we all have entry points when it comes to getting into our consciousness, and they're related to the five senses. So sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and then of course we have our sixth sense, the knowingness. And these are entry points to get in deeper into your consciousness. And so what I mean by that, for me, my entry point was visual. And so once I'm in the visual piece, I start to expand within the visual. What can I touch? What can I hear? What can I smell? And as I create a full sensory experience for that, pretending, all of a sudden my body starts to feel things. I start to get more information that comes out. And this is really beautiful way to attune, because our physiology is always communicating to us through all these different layers: sense, emotion, touch, all these different things. I mean, I know a lot of your listeners are mothers. I know mothers can, and I'm sure you know with your own children, what do you think a baby is doing from 0 to 6 months? They are literally touching everything, putting everything in their mouth. They are smelling things. Like, they are sensory beings, picking up on information. And they're doing that because they're getting information coming into their system. And so it's the same way with our internal world. It's setting the intention, following the breadcrumbs, and expanding into that. And it's having fun with it, because a lot of times we don't realize that curiosity is the antithesis of all the pain that can show up for women
Yeah.
around healing.
Yeah.
Like, how do I stay curious? Because that we can't feel these negative emotions if we stay in the energy of curiosity.
Why do you say that?
So there's a term. It's from my somatic experiencing training, called Gestalt. Have you heard of it?
Mm-mm.
So Gestalt is used in many different contexts, but Gestalt essentially means, you've seen this in illusion pictures. Have you seen those pictures where it's like an old woman, but then also a young woman at the same time, or a picture of like a chalice, but it's like two faces facing each other? So that is the Gestalt. And essentially, the mind cannot focus on both at once. It cancels each other out. And so with curiosity, it allows this kind of Gestalt experience to show up, where it nullifies maybe the shame or the judgment or the pressure as you continue to focus on that. And this is something I do with my clients as well in other contexts, where, maybe they have something that feels unpleasant come up. And so we focus on, well, what feels pleasant, and allow them to experience both at once.
Mm.
And it's a really beautiful way for the body to realize, like, oh, I actually can hold two things at once. And it almost like cancels each other out, with one of them becoming more powerful than the other.
Totally. I literally gave her her human design chart, and I was like, just get like curious with it. Like, that's my thing. Like, I
Yeah.
tell people all the time, like, just get curious with it. But like, I know what that means, but like, having you say it, like, I'm like, that is truly what I mean by that. And just your explanation was so great.
Yeah.
As for clearing energy, I also think that that's such an important factor in ways that and maybe you can bounce off of this as well, especially like in our bedroom and stuff like that. But then also, like, for an example, like, we just got back from vacation, and my husband, like, he was kind of like cranky on Monday because he had to go back to work, and like his email load was just, ridiculous. And I could feel him, and I literally tell him, I'm like, that's your energy. Like even my kids, like, if they have meltdowns or things like that, I'm like, that's your energy. Like, I say it out loud just to let like the universe know, like, do not come into my space. So what do you think of those two tactics, and like, what are some other ways to get rid of energy, bad energy?
Well, first of all, I'm freaking love that you said that, of saying that's not my energy, because once again, so this is what's so important with this work, is especially as women, we hold on to so many other people's thoughts, emotions, and then guess what happens? If we don't have sovereignty, we identify with it. And if we identify with it, then we are taking on the responsibility of holding it. And then our nervous system holds it, our body holds it, and then we pay the price. And it's so true. Like, having done advanced energy work now for the past 6 years, like, I'll have like sadness come into my face out of nowhere. And if I didn't know any better, I'd be like, oh, I'm just all of a sudden very sad. And no, that's not true. It was actually someone else I knew in my community that I knew exactly who it was. And so, yes, claiming that this is not my energy, it was such a powerful way to be like, no, I'm not identifying with this and this is not me. And even saying that out loud, because here's the thing, that is your intention moving the energy. Intention moves energy. And, there's so many different practices to clear energy. That's why, I do it through meditation. Other people do it through movement. Dancing is such a beautiful way. And I would say like very intuitive somatic dancing, like literally letting your body guide you with the intention of I am clearing out anything that isn't me. Just setting the intention and letting your body move. So movement, baths are really powerful for this, especially salt, like sage is a really great one. Palo Santo, all these different ways you can smudge, incense. These are all resources to help you get that energy out. And the intention is what matters. And, there's so many levels to this, right? But having that practice is so important. So I love that you do that.
One last thing I've been doing, which it's kind of funny, but it has been working, is I take a shower before I get to bed and like I literally am like washing the day away. But movement,
Yeah.
like I have been like moving my hips in a figure eight. That has been working as well. So doing figure eight hip sway movement in the shower is a plus too.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I'm going to have to put that into my next shower routine.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I want to get on to Holosoma. So that is work across all layers of consciousness. So your spiritual, energetic, mental, emotional, and physical. And you describe like trauma and survival patterns as imprints that live across like lifetimes, ancestry lines, and lived experience. So for the mother who is doing cycle breaking work in the real time right now, what does it look like to address these layers like simultaneously, and how does your body's like capacity directly impact like what her children are absorbing, marrying, and inheriting from her? Fully loaded question.
So holosoma, just to kind of explain it a bit better, because it is, addressing things across all layers. So it's two Greek words, holo and soma, and it means whole body. And really where I was initially inspired to use that name was from the holographic brain theory from the scientists. Back in the day, they would go into people's brains, do different experiments, et cetera, trying, or even in mice, to try to understand where was memory stored in the brain. And so they'd remove parts of the brain, but the memory would still be there. And so that really confused scientists, because it's like, okay, like, is there just no one place that memory is stored? And so that's when the new theory of like, okay, memory is actually distributed across the brain all at the same time. And it's just like a hologram. So a hologram, even if you to destroy part of a hologram, the full image still comes through. We are operating as multidimensional beings across all layers of consciousness, spiritually, energetically, psychically, mentally, emotionally, physically, and we typically go through all layers simultaneously. So going back to ancestral imprints, going back to soul imprints, we have, ancestral epigenetics, gene expressions that can shift depending on our environment. It's the same thing with our soul. And so we come into bodies with nervous systems that have already adapted to where our soul's already been, where our ancestral lines have already been. And so there is this spiritual component. Like there's so many clients I work with where they have inherited patterns from their mother, their mother's mother, et cetera. And that shows up, energetically, mentally, emotionally, et cetera. It shows up in these tight, contracted pelvic bowls. It shows up in gut issues. It shows up in, issues with our reproductive organs, our hormones, all these different things. And I can't tell you how many sessions I've had where we have had ancestors come in and cleared stuff from the women of their line because how much they've had to hold. So many generations. So there's such an important piece. Like it's not just the body. It's not just the emotion, not just mental. It's also the spiritual. It's also the energetic. And at the same time, the body is where we are alive here on this earth. In order for us to truly be alive, we need to be in our bodies. And once we are in our bodies, we have agency and choice. And so that is where we truly can reorganize the nervous system. For women that are trying to cycle break, this is such an important thing to focus on, to orient towards, because women are the emotional and energetic container of the household. Like whether or not they realize it, their nervous system impacts every single person around them. And it impacts their children. Their children are learning even from when they're in the womb. Even in the womb with their mother, they are learning. Their nervous system is starting to develop. How does my mom respond to crisis? How does my mom respond to overwhelm? How can she hold herself? How does she regulate herself? And the children energetically follow suit. And what's so powerful about mothers and their children is that you are in the same body together. Once you are separated, that energetic tie is so strong. That's why women, mothers' intuition is on a whole nother level compared to the fathers. The earth is full of just women and their children. And it was a really powerful statement to think about because it's like, that is so true. Like, we are the source of life for every single person on this planet.
Hmm.
I want to be cautious here because I say this to empower women, not
Hmm.
to put them in fear. Because I think, once again, with perfectionism, it's like there's a lot of mothers that are like, oh my God, I have to be perfect. I have to be the best mother. If I'm not regulated all the time, I'm going to ruin their lives. I want to do better and be better. And so I say this not to cause fear of like, oh my God, I'm going to mess things up, but more to be like a woman who is resourced, who feels safe, who prioritizes her pleasure without shaming herself, without judging herself, is literally breeding a new wave of humans who know how to emotionally regulate and also not judge themselves and shame themselves where it's never good enough and they're never worthy enough and they can never rest. And so what I think is so beautiful about cycle breaking is helping women expand their capacity to hold their joy, to hold support in their system. And that can be a journey in and of itself. Some women don't know how to hold joy without it leading to pain or judgment or guilt or shame. So that in and of itself, we want to slowly expand that capacity in a way that the woman doesn't go into overwhelm or shutdown. But I see that as so important because it can be triggering to tell a woman, oh, just go enjoy yourself and have the afternoon off. It's like, no, they actually have to build the capacity to even get there, but you can get there.
You can get there. And I'm a walking billboard of that. I feel like when my husband looks at life usually with like glass half full, and like he would always like be like, why can't you just be happy? Like, what are you chasing? I remember him like asking me this like whenever I was in my dark days, and like I really couldn't feel joy. I really couldn't feel happiness. I didn't even know where to find it. Like it was
Yeah.
it is so real that like, it is not an anomaly. Like I felt like I was alone, and now that I'm, kind of in the messy middle. I feel like we're always in the messy middle in this journey. It's just like now I want every mom to be enlightened about this because I'm like life doesn't have to be hard. Like we've been so conditioned to like hustle and rush, buy our kids all the, best clothing, but then we're wearing, 10-year-old grandma panties or, from college or something like that. Just like not
Yes,
taking the
yes.
time to actually buy ourselves things or, do things that are finding enjoyment. So I'm just so glad that like we're talking about this, and
Yeah.
just to let people know like there is another side of, motherhood and just life in general too. So much of like mainstream healing culture, we kind of touched a little bit on this, it is built on like breakthroughs and like constant transformation, and your work like intentionally moves in the opposite direction. So, you're really teaching like real integration, and it is slow. It is co-creative too. That's been really hard for me, and rooted in, understanding your body intelligence. So for the mom who is, exhausted and from, trying to fix herself through, constant diets or trying to fix their kids like because of like tantrums or, school difficulties, what does it actually look like to shift from chasing transformation to actually building a sustainable like capacity?
Yeah. So 100%. There are so many women who have been working on themselves for years, and they've read a ton of books. They listen to the podcast. Once again, they've done somatic practices. They get EFT tap, and they do all the management strategies. And it's like, why isn't this working? And the biggest issue is that for these women, there is a lot of internalized shame that is tied to their identity. And once again, this goes back to I should be further along than where I am now. I've been doing years of healing. I've been working on myself. Why do I still feel this way? And so there's this guilt and shame of I did XYZ. Why don't I feel like X? So, which is a very valid, very valid thing to question. And so once again, you said healing being maybe a word you don't like to use anymore. 100% agree. I want to get away from the word healing because you are already whole exactly as you are. You are already whole exactly as you are. And I know that can maybe be hard for some women to hear. I mean, I know for me it was hard to hear that because it's, no, you don't understand. I had to reframe my relationship to my nervous system, my body. And the biggest thing was learning. For me, I had to learn about the nervous system. I had to learn about my organism as a being, not identifying with this meat suit that I'm in. It's a part of me, but it is not my identity. But learning that my nervous system is always working for me. It is asking me to listen. So, case in point, I used to pick at my skin a lot. Like I, had this like nervous habit picking. And I used to be so judgmental towards myself about it. It's like, why am I doing this? Stop this, like this bad habit, blah, blah, blah. But really, my body is intelligently trying to manage stress that was coming up. It was regulating me. And so it was me reframing of, wow, thank you for sharing that with me. Now, how can I attune to what actually deeper is happening? Because that was a management strategy. So there's something deeper happening inside of me that was causing that to come up. Because clearly something in my body was like, I'm not safe. I'm not safe. And so this once again is
Oof.
learning that I have certain things that I do. So one part of it is unpacking the shame and realizing that your body's always telling you the truth and attuning to that and following the breadcrumbs. And like I said, there's many different entry points to do that. And the other piece is realizing that, quote unquote, healing happens in every minute of every day. It doesn't happen in the 1 hour meditation class you go in. It doesn't happen in the retreat you go to. Yes, stuff happens there,
Yeah,
insight
big
happens,
celebration.
expansion happens, but life is literally in the mundane moments of every single day. And it's learning, how can I expand my capacity to just be in my pleasure and enjoy my life 1% more at a time, and building up enough resourcing of like, oh, I actually feel good, and almost like doing less, honestly. Doing less is helps so many people with healing. It's like, yes, do it if it brings you joy, but don't do it if you're coming from it with the intention of, let me fix myself. And so once again, that's a huge component of it.
First off, I want to say human design tells you where your entry point is. Last night, like my older two kids, they were super emotional. And I feel like the way that I've kind of like overcome like certain situations like that was like literally saying out loud, I have the best husband. I have the best kids. I have the best house. Like, I feel like people probably think I'm crazy because like I am constantly like saying things out loud, like talking to myself just because like that's how I like reprogram my like subconscious. But I feel like, yes, I do not really love doing laundry. Yes, I do not really love doing dishes. I've been kind of like being delusional, being like, I love dishes. I love laundry. And I feel like that's one thing that has helped me during, kind of get my body into that safety. But, I will say that I just had like a huge breakthrough. And I told my mom this morning whenever I dropped the kids off that, if women are, a lot of them are dealing with like Hashimoto's, thyroid, that is because of like high cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone, which means that you have an imbalanced gut, which means that you have a dysregulated nervous system, which means that your body does not feel safe.
Yep. Literally, it's all connected, all connected.
All connected. And it's taken me a very long time to like get that connected. Three years ago, I started my business as a fitness coach and I was a gut health specialist. And like people thought I was a crazy weirdo back then. And now I'm like, into nervous system. They probably, still think I'm a crazy weirdo. I'm like, this is real life.
Yes, 100%. And I love what you did, the reprogramming, because as humans, we have a negative bias to look at things from our culture, from our families, and it's so easy for us to focus on the negative. And so there is a component of reprogramming towards the positive. And I even love what you said too about, you know, I love doing dishes, et cetera. It's honestly, it's posing the question of like, what if I actually enjoyed this? What if? And just like opening that doorway to like, how could I look at this or feel this differently, and being open to the curiosity of what would that feel like? What if I actually really liked having the time to myself to fold my laundry, these like 5 minutes a piece? So I love that. And 100% everything is connected. Our mental affects our emotional affects our physical affects, it triggers things in the energetic. It's tracing it to the root. It's just so true about this pressure we put on ourselves to, once again, you're not good enough as you are, body. You have to change. And it causes this unnecessary pressure where the body doesn't feel safe. And then that's why, these diet fads never work, and these forcing and restricting never works, because the body doesn't feel free.
When I was fitness coaching, like I saw women doing literally my protocols, like exactly to the T. And they were, losing very minimal, weight, if not, sometimes any. And I realized that their body was just in such a constant fight or flight mode that it couldn't feel safe. So like I was just telling them to do a bunch of things without addressing like you said, the root cause. I can't wait to do even more research. This is awesome work that you're doing. So tell us where we can find you and what resources you have available.
I would love to share with you an energetic hygiene meditation, a little over 20 minutes, but honestly, once you learn the tools, you can do it yourself in literally 30 seconds to a minute. And I challenge everyone, if you do get this meditation, to do these tools every single day. You will notice a shift in your anxiety. It will go from like level 100 all the way down close to zero. So there's that piece. And then also I have a capacity practice to help you kind of build your nervous system capacity to hold your success, to hold your safety, to hold your pleasure, to hold whatever you desire in life. Mostly work with people one on one, and then do coaching around that. So, kind of providing catered homework for them to kind of build these skills and tools themselves. And then I also teach, classes. They can find me on my website, so revellerette.com, Instagram, same Revellerette, and then also Threads, Revellerette as well.
I will link all of this in the show notes for you all, as always. Again, thank you, Ravelle, for being here. You are amazing, and I can't wait to talk again soon.
Same. All right. Great to meet you.